So today's webinar is on reporting tips and tricks. As I mentioned, my name is Tara Nardini. We will be recording this, so if anyone needs to listen to it after, it will be posted to the Top Step Consulting website. Just a couple items before we get started on the agenda. Our next webinar is on consulting skills. It'll take place on September 11th. Our next user group is actually tomorrow in Boston, so some of you may already be going. There's another one coming up on September 19th in Denver. So this is all on the Top Step website. If you're interested, please feel free to go out there, look, register. Obviously, let us know if you have any questions. Today, we will be going over how to review or actually think through your configuration for reporting, some best practices for reporting on creating reports, sharing and organizing reports, standardizing reports, and then maintenance, and along with maintenance, the cleanup strategies there. These are common problems that we've seen and worked with clients on, so thought we would present them to you. Hopefully it helps. Okay, so reviewing your configuration. When you think through, configuration, it's really, and reporting, it's really how you're capturing the data. What are your key metrics that you're trying to report on, and how is that data identified? So a lot of reporting really has to do with your setup of data. A good example of this that I tend to find is on the utilization front. So most clients, no matter who they are, they need to measure some form of utilization. So it doesn't really matter how you define it, it's just how do you capture the items that you're trying to measure. And what I do see a bit is helping clients categorize the hours that they want to count towards utilization credit. So for example, when you're looking at these things, a lot of folks use task types. So I often recommend using task types. Task types allow you to identify what type of task it is within a project so that when people post time to that project and task, it categorizes those hours. So I tend to use billable, non-billable, productive, those types of categories. And then actuals can be pulled within those task types to measure against your target hours or whatever your utilization parameter is. And that said, a lot of the times what we see is people are using task types. Either A, they're not familiar with the task type functionality, or they're using task types to capture some other category of data. So then it happens that they default to perhaps using project stages. So considering everything in process as billable, for example. Well, if you have an organization where, yes, in process are client billable projects, but then you also might have internal initiatives that are under kind of the initiative project stage. With that, what ends up happening is people will try and pull those out manually and add them to their billable hours because they're looking at it from a stage basis. So what you want to do is if you categorize those, if you use different task types to categorize, you can use your internal initiatives and you can call it something like productive. And then you can create a custom calculation that will allow you to add together your billable hours and your productive hours and use all of those towards your utilization credit for your resources. So that is something that we often find. If you need to measure other things at the task level, there's also always options to create some custom fields, custom drop-downs that allow you to create those high-level categories so you're not losing anything. It's just looking at measuring it a different way. That's a good example that I tend to look at when you're thinking through configuration. So if you can keep that in the back of your mind, and when you look at this, if there's things you're trying to measure and you can't get to them, we really should look at how are you capturing that data so that you can report back on it. Okay? That's just a good tip. So when you're looking at creating reports, there's a couple different things that you probably, many of you using the system for a while have already done, but perhaps you're still not familiar. There are some exclusive filter sets. You want to make sure those are on. And that's just allowing you to basically, within the filters, include and exclude information. So the example we have here is around groups as well as, and you can, for example, include a group or exclude a group when you're looking at reporting. This is really helpful so that you don't have to go through, pick through items after you run a report and filter things out and then recalculate it, because that gets really complicated if you're downloading everything to Excel and recalculating. So that can cause a significant issue. The other thing is report folders. Oftentimes people aren't aware of this internal switch. And what happens is you have a bunch of reports and they're all, maybe you've kind of sorted them by name or something of that nature. But it's really hard to, if you want to look for all of your resource management reports or all of your project reports, you're sorting through and trying to find names. And so if you use this report filter concept, you can actually take your reports and put them in specific folders. The other internal switch that I like to use is report filter sets. These are, we'll get into how to use them, but this is basically within the report you can define a filter set. So that helps you if you want to provide different levels of access or visibility when you're running a report. Okay. The other thing is to collapse sections. And oftentimes we don't use a lot of the sections inside of when you're building a report. So you're scrolling and scrolling through this big long form, and it can be, it can be cumbersome from just a usability standpoint. So if you're not using them a lot, just collapse them so you don't have to look through a bunch of information that you're not using. And the notes. When you save a report, you have an option to add notes for that report. This is really helpful if you're creating a lot of reports, or maybe you've created a report that's specific to something. It's a good reminder that helps you go back and go, okay, why did I create this report? What is it really showing? It also helps later when we get to kind of maintenance issues. So, do you think? Naming conventions. Now, I suggest when you're looking at naming conventions, you look at those from a reporting standpoint when you just name your reports overall. Same as a lot of people have naming conventions for projects when they name their projects, but they don't look at naming conventions when naming reports. So a good example of this is if you have project management reports, you can always start them with a project management or a PM prefix, something like that. Also, custom calculations. When you're thinking through custom calculations, a lot of custom calculations are created because OpenAir doesn't inherently have that as a standard field. You look at measuring different types of data. For example, the example I have here below is around recognized revenue. So some people like to look at kind of your total estimated revenue. And to do that, what I did is create a custom calculation that takes your recognized revenue plus your forecast or your projected revenue, and then you add those together and that creates your total revenue. And just a helpful tip there, if you add an asterisk to the end of your custom calculations, that quickly allows you to identify that that's a custom calculation. You can add any indicator just as long as you only use that for a custom calculation so that you know. This is helpful when people are looking through and going, I don't know where that field is, I don't know what that means. If you have an indicator, someone can go back and look to see that, look in custom calculations and try to identify what that calculation is. So when you go through the custom calc, you pick the name and you can look at what is that calculation actually doing. Now, everyone just hold on one second. It seems that we have a problem with folks being able to hear. Let me unmute.
The conference has been unmuted.
Hello?
The conference has been muted.
Okay, so I tried to unmute to see what was going on for everyone, and it just started playing music. So I apologize. Hopefully it's getting a little bit better. For those of you who weren't on at the start, I do apologize. There is an air and water show going on in construction. So if you're getting a lot of background noise, I'm very sorry about that. We will look at the recording after this session and determine if it needs to be re-recorded. If you have questions or anything specific to that or parts you missed, I'm happy to follow up via email or have a separate call. Okay? So, custom calculations. Now let's move on to sharing and organizing. This is a big thing when you're looking at, sharing out reports, who to share them with, who to give access to, who actually needs them. And the concept here is you don't want to give everyone a bunch of reports. Maybe they don't need them. Maybe they don't have even access to them, so they'll try running them and they'll get errors, and it will just cause a lot of questions. So that can be an issue. A good thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the folder concept. So you can have folders by function. I do this a lot with clients, have a resource management folder, a project management folder. Depending on what your functions are and who needs to see different types of reports, you can look at reports in a functional manner. There's also the concept of if you have regions, you can have a folder for a specific function of a report and then have subfolders for those regions so that you only share regions with someone or someone knows directly where to go within that function to look at what they're concerned with. If you're EMEA, you don't want to look at everything. You perhaps just want to look at the EMEA reports for your region. So that's some of the helpful tips with folders. With that, you can also share those folders or reports within those folders within an assignment group. So if you have a structure where you have a function and then a region, you can share the folder for the region with a specific assignment group. Or if you just have a function and reports within that function, you can either share the folder or you can share the actual reports in the folder with an assignment group. Okay? The assignment groups can either be the same assignment groups that you set up to maybe assign resources to tasks and projects, or it can be really helpful, depending on how matrix your structure is, to set up specific report assignment groups. It is a bit more setup, and you can add a prefix to the assignment group to identify that this is a report assignment group. That often helps folks, so then they know when they're scrolling through, sharing reports, who to share those with, what assignment groups they want to share because they've set up specific report prefix assignment groups. All right. And filter sets. So as I mentioned, filter sets can be used within the report. And let's say, for example, you have, I just went through this with a client, they needed everyone to have visibility to a bookings chart. And they wanted all of their resources to be able to see everyone in the bookings chart and understand their bookings. So for scheduling, for whatever purpose you might need that, that's what they needed. So we had to look at that access, and we had to change people to a different access from their booked assigned access. However, my client didn't want folks to see everything in all of the reports. So what we did was we specified within the reports for folks this booked assigned filter. We specified a filter set. So when they run the reports, all they see is what they're booked or assigned to. So that was really helpful in limiting the view in the report, giving people what they need so that they have the appropriate information to act on versus having a bunch of information to look through. So it can be very, very helpful there. So when you are, the other thing to think through is the reports. When you share out reports with folks, they run them, they see what they're booked assigned to because they're the ones running those reports. Now, when you schedule a report, so if I schedule a report and I only have access to myself, and I schedule that report and I send it out to folks, it the report inherits the person who's running its filter sets and assignments. So what happens is if I send that out, you're only going to see all the information that pertains to me. So please keep that in mind. You probably want to, and we'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation, but have a report owner, and you want to make sure that when you're scheduling reports, you look at what do those people need to see, and you make sure you run the report that's being scheduled from perhaps a report user, someone who has access to see more than just themselves, so you're not sending out information that doesn't actually pertain to folks. So bear in mind, whenever you schedule a report, it takes on your credentials versus the people running it. Dashboards. When you're looking at dashboards, it's helpful to, when you're creating a dashboard out in OpenAir, to create a separate report. You can just copy a previous report, but put in a dash prefix. By doing that, when you're looking at what dashboard to use to create that report, you can easily find it. You can also look at modifying things because maybe you don't want to see all of that information in a dashboard. So you can look at modifying that specific dash report so you're not modifying another report that you may like to use, and you have to continue adjusting filters, adjusting dates, things of that nature in the report if you're using one report for dual purposes. When you look at this chart title here, you can always take out that dash. You can change the name of your chart title if that's a concern, and because of the landscape in the chart, you want to make sure that it actually says, it doesn't have that dash. It actually says what the chart's about. So top tip there. And standardizing. So a big thing for reporting is how to standardize the reports, how to group them, how to standardize them. So we look at this in functions. I like to look at this in functions or even modules. You can think through, if it's helpful, think through the modules within the system and then kind of create reports based on those modules. So projects, accounting, people, process. Those are a lot of the reports that we see that folks use. And here are some examples of what you would see in the different types of categories. So projects reports. Most people need margin or profitability reports, bear in mind, and that means that you also need to have costs in the system. We run into that a bit, that you need to make sure that you have the data in there to get the data out. So from projects reports, accounting reports. That can be your revenue reporting, your actuals reporting, average bill rates, things of that nature that are going to be used more in regards to, if you think about accounting folks, or who's looking at it, your audience there. Resource reports. These are typically your bookings reports, your utilization reports, any kind of available hours, capacity planning reports. It's just helpful because then you can kind of point people in the right direction, especially, let's say you have a resource manager. That resource manager is going to be far more apt to using these resource reports that will help them identify where to go, what to look at, and what reports we should create. Audit reports. Those are your system reports to look at system maintenance. Make sure that you don't have a bunch of things within the system that you're not using anymore. Look at your user base. Look at your project base. Those are reports that typically weekly, monthly, you want to run to make sure that you're keeping the system as clean as possible. Because when you're looking at reporting, you have to do, there's maintenance involved. If you don't do the maintenance, you're not going to get the results that you're probably expecting. So standardizing reporting. As I was mentioning a little bit, you want to look at, it's recommended that you have a designated user. And it's not necessarily a resource who logs in and out of the system all the time. It's just an overall report user. Don't have anyone use that login. That login can just be used to create those standard reports. When you look at reports, you can filter on that specific report admin user, and that'll show you all of the standard reports in the system. It helps folks to understand what reports are considered standard, that type of thing. Because otherwise you can look and go, okay, do I look at Tara's report? What report should I be looking at? What are the standard reports? I'm getting different results. I don't know where to look. If you have this admin user and someone's in control of that, your administrator's in control of that, then everyone will have the same reports and the same information within the report. And the other thing it does is helps to alleviate some report formatting issues. What I mean by that is when you use a report, if I'm the report owner and I'm the one sharing all the reports, let's say I go in and I only want to look at certain information. So I collapse some columns, I hide some things. I'm looking at specific information within that report. So perhaps the week before nothing was collapsed, and now you have some collapsed, some not, or just a different view. That really creates confusion for folks when they're looking at reports. So that's another reason we recommend a report user, because what happens is if you have a person who actually does this and who is looking at the report, collapsing things, the report will take on those last settings. So that can be an issue when other people are running that report. So if you have an admin user who only goes in when it's time to actually make overall standard adjustments that have been agreed upon by the organization, the report will always come out looking the same versus collapsing, expanding, and hiding things. A reporting catalog. This is a big thing that I do for a lot of my clients, that TAPSEP does for a lot of their clients in general as well. A reporting catalog is just a basic catalog of all the reports that are done in your organization, what they mean with a few key fields. Who's the owner? What does the report mean? What is the report name? Who is it shared with? Who validated it? And a good example of this is, here is kind of our table of contents. You can click on it, go to the reports you need. You can see your different categories. This will help you organize potentially your reports, your folders. If you think through when you look at your reporting catalog, kind of what's missing, your folders of reports, that type of thing. And then in here, you can click on your table and you can go to the report that you're looking for. This is what one of the report catalogs that I've put together looks like. It really just, as I mentioned, the name, the type of report, the purpose of the report, who should use it, when should they use it, what custom calcs are in this report. Just helps give people a baseline. So if you have either employees that have transitioned roles and maybe now they need to look at different information, for folks that come into the organization new, maybe they need to understand what am I looking at, and it's great that you'll have hands-on training, but a reference guide for folks. You can post this out and people can refer to it. Anytime you have changes to reports, you come in here, you make the changes here, push that out to your users. They understand what their changes are when it's updated. Okay, we often recommend too to put in some screenshots. It just helps people get a visual of what you have in the name of the report, but what they expect when they run that report. So in case something's changed that someone didn't catch, or they have any questions, they want to make sure they're looking at the right thing, you have a visual there. Maintenance. Now, maintenance is a big thing for the system, and it goes back to the things that we've actually talked about around report users, around reports that have been created specifically by resources in the organization. They may run them, they don't know why there's differences in figures. Why am I seeing this? Why am I not? Why are you getting a different number? Things of that nature. So, and overall just confusion about what reports to run. So another thing with maintenance is schedule time. So sometimes what happens is people are getting reports for maybe a project that's closed or a report that they don't even know why they're getting this report. When was it? People keep pushing out scheduled reports. Are they using it? What is this? When is it scheduled? What is this for? So there's a new feature, and it's the status tab. You can go into the status tab, and you can look at information about those reports. You can look at when it was scheduled, and you can go through there and try and maintain those reports. I do recommend looking at when you have people doing your project closure process. You also identify if you had any reports that were scheduled that were coming to you specific to that project, so that you can go in and either look at using that report for something different, definitely remove it from the schedule if it's not needed anymore, and decide if that report overall is needed in the organization, because you don't want to have a report that no one's using. You definitely don't want to have a scheduled report that you're just simply clicking to delete out of your email all the time. So you can look at this scheduled time and identify if you need what you need to do with that report. So it's really helpful. Prior to that, there wasn't a lot of ways to look at kind of the reports that are being scheduled when they're going out, those types of things. New features, so a little fun. You can also, in the status tab, change ownership of reports. You have to be careful. So this little run action icon, you can select your reports and then decide what to do with that. Now keep in mind, if you do change the owner, it will delete the association from that previous user. So you have to communicate these changes. A big thing that I see happens when you're doing report maintenance, it's not communicated. So it generates a lot of confusion. People don't understand what happened to their report. They don't know why it was changed, those types of things. A bigger issue is making sure, I guess I should say, if you're actually doing the report maintenance, that's a step in the right direction. Just make sure that there's a change management process in place that will help identify these things. So something that's good, doing that report maintenance, something that's a positive for the organization, is actually viewed as a positive versus causing a lot of confusion. And all right, cleanup strategies. 1 second, it's really very loud. So cleanup strategies. This is definitely a big topic around maintenance. So it's really, I look at it and go, once a year, I know folks are busy. It's kind of the last on the list. People get acclimated to knowing what do I need, when do I need it, and they ignore things that they may not need. So you're not necessarily going through and cleaning things up as often as you perhaps should. I recommend doing this at least once a year, same with your reporting catalog, because if you don't, it can spiral out of control very quickly. Some folks can do this quarterly or semi-annually. They have it as part of a governance process around their system, but at least annually, it can be challenging, but it's a good thing to do. As you'll see here, reports that are created by users. From a project dashboard standpoint, someone goes out, they create a report, they put it on the dashboard for the project, for all of their projects. Well, you'll see here we have John's October hours. Well, what if it's December? Do we still need that? Are we going in and changing dates? What are we doing with these reports? Because someone else could be running this, and it's just causing confusion. When you're cleaning things up, as I mentioned, you want to make sure everyone knows. You want to not just let everyone know, you want to identify when is this going to be done, how, do you need this? Get all of the buy-in up front so you're not causing confusion. Then it would be probably in the best interest of the organization to limit those permissions, right, to administrators, so that you don't have these stuff on and off dashboards. You don't have that. If you don't have the ability, then people can go through an appropriate process to get the reports they need, because perhaps other people need them. So then it can be created by that report administrator role. So it kind of all goes back to that report administrator role. And that will allow us to standardize. And you can put those reports on dashboards, any of the standard reports. A report administrator can just, help decide which ones should be dashboard reports, so there's not a lot of ad hoc information going on. All right. So as I was mentioning, communication. But a big thing is deleting old reports. I know that people get very nervous about deleting reports because you kind of go, well, what if I might need that? Or someone's going to get upset if it's deleted, or it tends to be uncomfortable because then people go, what if I need it? Now I have to recreate it. What if I can't remember? So a good idea is to I suggest deleting things that you aren't using, putting in a process that says once a year on this date we're going to delete this, send out reminders based on how your organization communicates, announce this in meetings, put it on your, if you have town hall calls, just make sure everyone's aware of the dates and timelines that reports are going to be deleted, and then go through the process of deleting. You can also create a do not delete or a delete folder. Sorry. If you create that delete folder, you can take those reports and put them in a delete folder. That'll help clean up your kind of reporting structure. Now, the only negative to that is people could still go in there and run those if you'll have to take away assignments and other cleanup aspects of that. But at least it helps you categorize, or it's a baby step. So if you say, hey, this is new to the organization, we're going to put things in this delete folder. If we see no one's run them in 3 months after we put them in this delete folder, then they're going to be deleted. Or it's just a first step to say, okay, this goes in the delete folder. In a couple months we're deleting them. So you can take different baby steps. It's just suggested that you do, because otherwise there's a lot of reports. It gets confusing what's standard reports, and it can cloud the data that you really need people to look at. It can cloud the really good information that's out there because it's just overwhelming to look at, 40 reports. That can be cumbersome. So to delete unused reports, you can run a report, sort on your last run date, and then this little run action icon, if you select the reports you want to delete, you select them, and then you can identify what you want to do, this deleted icon here. So like I said, just make sure everyone's on the same page with that, but it's pretty simple if you need to delete in bulk or delete things that aren't being used, or if you use the delete folder idea, then you can go delete things. The other option is within the maintenance settings part of the system, and an administrator can do this, or anyone who might have access to that in the administration tab of your system. Now, the big thing here is if you delete reports by inactive users, there's no filter. So what can happen is you're thinking through, okay, well, this person's inactive, I just want to delete it. Well, you can't just delete it for that person. So you need to understand who are your inactive users. What reports do they have out there? Because what's going to happen is it's going to delete everything. So either you need to first go in and change your report owner before you delete these inactive users to just get the ones you want, or you use the previous method by just actually going through and deleting reports. If you're comfortable that you know who your inactive users are, and if they have reports they aren't valid, then this process in maintenance settings, you just go into your maintenance settings, click this, and then delete all of those reports. The other bonus to this is if you have a reporting catalog, it's much easier to kind of tie this all back in. If you have a reporting catalog, it's much easier, much more comfortable if you delete something. It gives you all the parameters, filters, and so forth, so you can go back in and recreate those reports. And custom calculations. So oftentimes people they realize they've created a custom calculation, put it in a report, and maybe that's not what they actually needed to get to, or maybe that's not valid any longer due to organizational changes. So if you go into your custom calculation and you try to delete it, but you discover it won't let you, it's because it's being used in a report. So to find out what reports it's being used in, you want to go to the detailed reports in OpenAir, and you can run a custom calculation detail report. And you can put in, as you see in my screenshot here, what are the custom calculations? We'll pull them up, and then what reports is it being used in. So then you can either go in and change the custom calculation that's being used in that report to a new one and then delete, or it'll just allow you to understand what reports it's in and the fact that why you can't delete them. Typically, if you were using it there, you probably want to go in and swap out for your new custom calculation, or identify if that also helps you to identify if that report's no longer valid, perhaps if the calc's not valid or other items in the report aren't valid. So just a quick and easy way to look at how to find your custom calculation. Custom fields, same concept. You can run a detailed report on the custom fields, and that will tell you where it's being used, so that you can either, if you want to, if you don't need that, if you're not using it, things like that. So just a couple different things that you might not have seen in your detail report that are helpful when you're cleaning up overall reporting. Big thing is when you're looking at reporting, you need to have some type of ongoing training. It helps. So whether it's a recorded session on how to use the reports, whether it's that reporting catalog that you walk folks through during new user training, or just at any, if you have if you have one large-scale company meeting, whatever it might be, just continue that training. Document your information so it's easy to find. If things are easy for folks, they tend to use them, and they tend to get comfortable and understand them and want to use them. If it's complicated or cumbersome, or they just can't find the information and they don't know what they're looking at, it really is a big hampering to having buy-in through the organization. So just think about, how does your organization function? How do they best absorb information? How can we get this information to them? Make sure we have it. Because it's great to tell folks. It's another thing to be able to provide them documentation. Reporting catalogs don't need to be cumbersome. They're meant to be kind of that bullet point look through, look at what you need. You don't have to read the whole thing. And we can also look at creating some quick reference points in like this tips and tricks. Just go through, have maybe polls on what are the tips, what are folks learning when they're looking at reports, creating reports. Look at putting a governance process in place around your reports so that you maintain your catalogs, that you maintain your reports, that you do your cleanup, that you maintain your custom calcs. So those are the things you can do that will help you ensure the organization has the appropriate information they need to make actionable decisions. They have what they need for buy-in, and you have what you need so they can buy into what you're providing, what the system helps provide, why they're putting all this information into the system, why we're asking folks to capture things in a certain way, if they understand how it comes back out to them in reporting. So that is 12:40. We got through all of our slides. Lastly, just some information on Top Step. If you need more information, obviously you can go to our website. As I mentioned earlier, our webinars, our user groups, everything's posted out there. Also, you can find us on LinkedIn. Please, we also have a user group out on LinkedIn that people post questions, and it kind of a forum type thing. So it's really helpful to a lot of our folks, and a lot of people tend to find really good tips and tricks out there from other users.